Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're taking a look at some more obscure cards that are currently trending on the secondary market. Now for the most part, these are cards that I noticed some unusually high prices attached to, and then I was kind of like scratching my head for a little bit there as to why. Now these are primarily going to be some more obscure tech cards for off-meta decks or Genesis format. On one hand, these cards can be harder to move since meta cards are really what drive the majority of changes that we see on the market, but at the same time, these changes are still worth paying attention to for us because it's very easy for other people to overlook them, so therefore we can try to take advantage early on and move certain cards while they're being hyped up before their prices have a chance to come back down. Let's get started. Alright, kicking things off, let's take a look at Mulcharmy Meowls. So Meowls is of course one of the Mulcharmy hand traps, and it's arguably the least popular of them. This card lets you draw a card if your opponent special summons a monster from their graveyard or banishment, so very useful depending on the format that we're in. Now a little while ago this card was really popular because it was strong against Malice, but they've sort of fallen off recently. In the current format, however, we are starting to see Meowls and Perulia see more play once again. Of course, Meowls can be really strong against Mitsurugi Yummy, since the Rituals and Yummy Synchros all have effects that special summon monsters from the graveyard, and we've also seen a little bit of a resurgence from Malice recently. At YCS Pittsburgh, it seems a lot of players were running Perulia and or Meowls in addition to Fawalos, and the general idea is that players just want to draw into more Engine, since Engine in general just feels so much stronger than other non-Engine that you could be drawing into right now. So Meowls was actually in a huge downtrend recently. This is a card that was just over $60 about 6 months or so ago, but within the past month it had gotten as low as $20. This is largely because the card is finally going to receive its first reprint in the legendary 5Ds decks, which should be coming out officially here in the TCG later this week, a couple of weeks later than expected, but still welcome nonetheless. However, at the same time, Yu-Gi-Oh players want to bling out their decks, and the reprint is only going to be coming out as a common. Even though players aren't necessarily buying the QCRs, which is the highest rarity, they would still rather play a holo version over a common, so we are seeing this secret rares starting to trend back up in price. So yeah, as I mentioned, the secrets were down at about $20, but at the moment, there's only 1 or 2 listings before the secret rares are back up to $35 lowest on TCG Player. The QCR printing, interestingly enough, hasn't really moved. Those are still at around 100, and then the commons are pre-selling right now for around $8 to $10 each. Now this does make sense. If the commons are say $9 and the secrets are $20, I think a lot of people would rather pay the extra $10 and just pick up the original secret rare versions of the card over a common that is going to go down in value the more the card gets reprinted. Now in general, I feel like the Mulcharmies are just cards that you should always own a set of if you're looking to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh at all. They're all going to see fluctuating amounts of play depending on how each individual format shapes up. And if you don't have them already, I would definitely look to pick them up from the legendary 5Ds decks, since they reprint a ton of other really good staples in there that you should probably own as well. However, I feel like when we eventually get the next rarity collection formatted set, Meowls is definitely going to be in there, so with the recent bump in the price of the secret rares, it's maybe not the best time to pick up that specific version right now. I would definitely just look to play with the commons for now, wait for the card to receive another reprint before you look to bling out your playset of this particular card. Up next, let's take a look at Queen of Thorns. So Queen of Thorns is a card that's very specific for the plant deck, and it's sort of like an extra deck floodgate option. This is a level 6 synchro monster that requires the non-tuner to be a plant, and this card requires both players to pay 1000 life points in order to normal or special summon a monster from hand except for plants. Now in the current format, this card could potentially be a very powerful floodgate. Against something like Yummy, this card could easily force your opponent to pay like half of their life points just to go through their regular combo. But I believe that the Black Garden cards are also seeing some play in Genesis format as well, and theoretically this is a floodgate that doesn't cost any points. Now in general, this isn't something that most decks are going to be able to make, but the card has been getting a little bit of attention recently because of the Black Garden cards that just came out in Doom of Dimensions. Basically, Queen of Thorns is a very situational extra deck option for them. Probably not something that you're going to make blindly going into game 1, but maybe it's a good option to go into later in the game. Now the big reason that Queen of Thorns is trending right now though is that the card wasn't actually reprinted in the legendary 5Ds decks. even though the decks did reprint a lot of those relevant plant cards. This card hasn't been printed in more than a decade. This was originally a super rare coming back in Crossroads of Chaos, and then it got one random reprint in Astral Pack 5 as a common back in 2014. Because of that, we've seen near mint copies of Queen of Thorns basically disappear from the market completely. The super rares used to be about $5 for the unlimited printing, they're now up to about $20 each. And then we also have those commons, they were only $2 to $3 before, but even those are up to $10 lowest now on TCG Player with very few listings available. With this card, I feel like this is a very obvious sell. It feels extremely likely that this card gets a reprint within the next couple of months, probably in something like Maze of Muertos, and although the Rose deck is cool, I don't think it's going to be top tier or even close to meta relevant anytime soon. Maybe keep a single copy for yourself to use if you are really interested in playing the deck, or maybe using the card in a Time Wizard format, but if not, this is definitely something you should dig up out of your bulk and look to offload as soon as possible. Next up, we have Backup at Ignister. So Backup is a card that was very useful when Malice still had Dormouse and Underground at 3, and then still when it was at 2. Now this card lets you special summon it from hand if you control a Cyberse that was summoned from the extra deck, and then on summon you search for a Dark Cyberse monster, then discard a card. So this card was really impactful because it helped to play through your opponent interacting with your Dormouse. You could make the Dormouse into a Lingeribo, then special summon this card and search for a Wizard at Ignister, giving you bodies to make Splash Mage or Lizardos with, but then the Wizard would also be really useful if your opponent continued to try to interact with you. Unfortunately, Backup has only ever been good in Malice, but that was enough to make this card fairly expensive ever since its release in Alliance Insight, so that it was more than just the typical $1 or so that we see from bulk ultra rares and core sets. Now with the downfall of Malice, this card had settled down at around $4 to $5, nothing too crazy. However, we've actually seen Malice start to see competitive success at the regional level over the last few weekends, as players are taking advantage of the fact that others are no longer running Artifact Lancia in the sideboard, and Malice is still able to set up some pretty crazy boards if left uninterrupted. As a result, we've seen ultra rare copies of Backup jumping up from $5 before to $10 now. It is a little bit strange on TCG Player since there are multiple sold listings at $10, then there's a couple of random listings up at like $5 each. The thing we have to keep in mind with this card though is that we just got confirmed that the Lost Art promo that we're going to be getting next is this card, which makes it so much more accessible. With the legendary 5Ds decks coming out as well, I think we'll definitely see people buying the decks and then getting a copy of Backup alongside it, and that additional influx of copies available on the market should bring this card's price back down. Beyond that, it sort of just depends on how relevant you think Malice is going to be. Like, the deck is cool, I just don't know if it's consistent enough to compete consistently. With Draco Tail and Yummy, the deck still seems really prone to bricking. That said, the reprint dropping within the next couple of weeks tells me that if you have extra copies of Backup at Ignister, you should definitely be looking to sell. Alright, now this is a pretty random one. We have Beta the Electromagnet Warrior. Now Burst Protocol is the next core set coming to the TCG. It should be here in February of 2026. It's actually looking like a really solid set, introducing some pretty meta relevant cards. One theme that seems to be going mostly under the radar is the support for the Magnet Warriors, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. The new cards seem really good. I don't think they'll be too meta relevant, but they should be an interesting rogue or tier 2 strategy. The deck did actually make it to the top 32 at a YCS in Japan a couple of weeks ago, but we do have to take the result with a grain of salt. Over there they still have Max C legal, they have Block Dragon legal, which is obviously a really big searcher for the Magnet Warriors since they're all rocks, and they also have Moon still legal, which is notable because it was a Fiendsmith Magnet Warrior deck. And on top of that, the event was a best of 1, so no side deck taken into consideration. Nevertheless, people will still be hyped that Magnet Warriors are actually going to be playable and have some potential, and players are looking at which existing pieces they should be picking up. The notable piece is Beta. This card searches for a Magnet Warrior on summon, and then during your opponent's turn you contribute it to summon another Magnet Warrior from your deck. So super cool card that's able to get bodies out of your deck. Of all the existing support, this card was the one that was seeing play in that list. It was used at 3 in the build that topped over in Japan. That said, this card has just one printing. It was a super rare in the Yugi starter deck that came out back in 2016. That's back when those ABC cards were first introduced, but the ABC cards cards were actually relevant and they've been reprinted, while the Magnet Warriors have never seen any sort of reprint at all. That said, Beta is a really difficult card to find. If you're looking to play the deck, you're going to want to grab 3 copies, but you're right now looking at a market price of about $12 per copy. Obviously pretty crazy for a tier 2 or lower deck, but this is probably the only expensive existing piece of the strategy that you'll need. For the most part, I think that this card probably gets a reprint closer to when Burst Protocol drops. By the time Burst Protocol comes out, this card will have been out of print for a full decade, so it'll definitely need some sort of reprint in order to help push Burst Protocol as a product as well. On top of that, Magnet Warriors, realistically, they aren't going to be all that meta relevant. That said, this is the type of card you guys will definitely want to dig up out of your bulk to see if you can get some value out of it before it does eventually get reprinted. Alright, so to wrap things up, we're taking a look at a couple of cards related to Genesis format, and the first one here is Yugioh Layered. So this card is a generic rank 6 Xyz monster with a pretty simple effect. You detach a material from it to steal an opponent's monster, but you can't activate its effect or attack with it. It does have another effect where if you have a trap on the field, you contribute a monster to destroy a face-up card on the field. So this card has a very specific combination of attributes that makes it potentially useful. This card is actually seeing play in the Odeon deck over in Genesis format. The Odeon deck does have the ability to make rank 6 monsters. They don't go into the extra deck very often, so they have a lot of room for some flex spots. They have a few different cards with Merciless Scorpion of Circuit, Apophis the Swamp Deity, and Divine Serpent Apophis, all being level 6 monsters that could be used to make Yugioh Layered. The other thing is that since you're playing all of the continuous trap monsters, this turns on the Yugioh Xyz's other effect. Effectively, you're using Yugioh Layered to steal an opponent's monster, then tribute that monster and destroy another one of their face-up cards, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, Yugioh Layered has only ever had one printing, and it was back in the Dragons of Legend Complete series, which was that little box that wasn't particularly popular. It's hard to get because this card was a promo in there, and that's the only place that you can get it. So it's actually really difficult to just find copies of this card floating around in people's trade binders. Even though this isn't the most used card by any means, its scarcity has caused it to go up in price. So this was around $4 to $5 before, but it's now sitting at just under the $10 mark per copy. With this one, it feels like it's just a matter of time before it gets reprinted, since its one printing came out back in 2020, but it's not in demand enough for me to say that it's necessarily on Konami's reprint radar or anything like that. That said, it's a very low impact card, only being used by the one deck, and even then it's definitely an optional tech card that you can play if you just want to try it out. If you do happen to be holding onto a few of these, maybe keep a single copy for yourself just to have it available in case it's useful in something in the near future and the card doesn't get reprinted for whatever reason. But it feels like this is probably a card you should sell while it is getting attention for the first time. And finally, the last card we're looking at for today is the Book of Lunar Eclipse. So Lunar Eclipse follows the theme of book cards with an effect that revolves around flipping monsters face down. However, this card came out much later than the others, and honestly, it just objectively feels a lot worse. With this one, you have to discard a card, and then you flip exactly 2 monsters on the field into face down defense mode. So over the last few years, this card has been talked about every now and then, but ultimately it never really sees any sort of competitive success. The discard is definitely too big of a cost, and it basically just always gets completely outclassed by either Book of Moon or Book of Eclipse. However, it seems that the card is making an appearance over in Genesis format. Flipping your opponent's monster face down is pretty big in Genesis format since they can't use the monster as Xyz or Synchro material. On top of that, both Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse cost points, but Book of Lunar Eclipse doesn't. This means that Book of Lunar Eclipse is the next best alternative if you're looking for some sort of generic disruption, since it does functionally the same thing, just a little bit worse. As a result, we are seeing quite a bit of movement with the higher rarity printings of Book of Lunar Eclipse. This card came out back in Lightning Overdrive, so it has both a Starlight Rare and Secret Rare printing. The secrets used to only be like $1 each. They've recently jumped all the way up to $5 per copy. And then with the Starlights, the listings are of course all over the place, Based on the sold listings, we see a couple of them at like $60 to $80. In terms of listings available, there's a couple of $90, but then out of nowhere, the card jumps up to like $150, $160, something obviously ridiculous like that, just because there's not very many quantities available. Fortunately, the card did receive a reprint as a super rare in the 2022 tins. Those are still really cheap. They're basically still bulk at like 25 cents each. With this one, I feel like it's going to be a very meta-dependent tech over in Genesis format. There's going to be some formats where it's really good and some where it's really bad. It just ultimately depends on how the point distributions shape up. Ultimately though, this isn't something I'd be paying anywhere close to $100 for, right? Pick up a set of the supers for like $1 just to have them available. Maybe spend a little bit on the secrets if you're really into blinging out your deck for Genesis format, if you can get the set for like $10 to $12. Definitely look to offload those Starlight Rares while they are at an all-time high. Alright guys, that is all I have for today's episode. Definitely gonna see things slowing down as we approach the end of the year here. We don't have any more competitive events except for the remote duel YCS. We shouldn't get any ban list, and the only last set that we have coming out at the end of the year is Phantom Revenge, which isn't really looking like it's going to be that meta relevant based on what happened over in the OCG, but we'll still pay attention to that because the set should reprint some interesting things as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.